Hello, welcome back to my channel. Thanks for tuning in. Today I am showing you a variation of the solid granny square. This is the traditional solid granny square. So solid because there's not many holes in it, just these holes or gaps at the corners. So this is the traditional. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. But there's a variation on this, and it's also slightly easier, especially if you're a beginner. Now this solid granny square requires you, if you can see, it requires you to go into every stitch. Okay, so you're required to do stitches into stitches. Okay, now if you find that tricky going into the stitches, maybe your dexterity isn't so great, your eyesight isn't so great, or you're a beginner and you're still finding your way around stitches, okay, if you're still finding that tricky, then this is a variation. Now if I put them side by side, okay, this one's a bit smaller, but if I put them side by side, you can see they are kind of similar but different. This one, we still work along each side just as we do on this one, but instead of working into stitches, we work between stitches. Okay, so if I can show you here, can you see this little tiny gap here? You've got this bigger gap at the top and then this tiny one. This tiny one is the stitch, and that's where you would normally work, but instead we've gone in between. So let me pop my fingers behind these two. These two, now if you can see two lots of little gaps, you'd have a stitch here and a stitch here, but instead they're in between. So it just makes it a bit easier. You don't have to find those top two loops of the stitch, and it's just so much easier depending on, you know, like I said, eyesight, whether you're a beginner, whether, you know, your dexterity is not so good to get under those two stitches. I'm doing that because I'm thinking of the hook going under. And also, all that aside, even if there's nothing wrong with your eyesight, you've been crocheting for years, the other thing with this is that it gives a really lovely effect. This one, as the name suggests, is solid. It's pretty closed in. This one ends up just having a slightly more meshy effect. You can see that there's more of a mesh effect. You can see the hand through there. So it's slightly more open. If I put this one on my hand under there, you can't really see a lot going on apart from where these gaps are. So that's the difference. It's really simple. If you've never made the closed solid granny square before, don't worry. I'm going to show you every step of the way. So I'm just going to use some regular DK yarn today. DK is also known as light worsted or 8-ply number 3 yarn. Okay, just for wherever you are, that's what it's known as. And to go with it, I'm going to use a 4.5mm hook. You could use whatever hook and yarn you prefer. Okay, so if you are familiar with how to do the basic granny or the solid granny, then you will know how to start off. But for everyone who doesn't, I'm going to start from the very beginning. Tutorial is good for beginners, and if you are more advanced, then just skip forward to the part you need, and just be aware that I am making it so that everyone, making the video so that everyone should be able to join in. Okay, so start with your slip knot on your hook, and then going to chain 4, and then I'm going to go into the first chain and make a ring, and then pop that tail over the back, and then I will work over that as I crochet. Now pop your thumb somewhere near that ring so you don't lose it if you're not used to working into a ring. Okay, and then chain 3 this first chain 3 always will count as a double crochet. I'm using US terms, double crochet. In the UK terms, that would be a treble, but I'm going to say double crochets, okay? And then go back into the ring and make a double crochet. So I am assuming you know how to make double crochets and you know how to do the chain and the slip stitch, and that is all you need to know today. Okay, and then another double crochet into the ring, and then chain 2, and then 3 double crochets into the ring, because this first one here counted as a double crochet, so we have 3 there, so we want to do 3 on this side as well. And then chain 2. Chain 2s are forming our corners, and then another 3 double crochet into the ring, chain 2 for our third corner. So can you see here we've got one side, corner, bottom, side, and corner, and then the side. So now we need to do our fourth set of 3 double crochet. 1, 2, 3, and then chain 2 for your last corner. And then if you look at your first chain 3, find the very top chain, and slip stitch into there. So just pop your hook in. I like to go under 2 loops rather than 1, and then yarn over, pull through, and pull through that chain, and there is your first little tiny square. You've got 4 corners and 4 sides. Cute. Okay, so I like to then take the tail and hold on to the top of this and just pull that in slightly, just to tighten that a little bit. Okay, now this is where, if you are used to making the solid granny square, this is where we're going to change it up a little bit. What we're going to do is find the space between this first stitch, or chain 3, and the stitch next to it. Just pull them apart, find that space. Okay, we're going to do a slip stitch into this space. So go into there, yarn over and pull through, and then slip stitch. Okay, so now our hook and yarn are coming from this space in between those 2 stitches, and then chain 3. Chain 3 will always be your first double crochet. Okay, so then we're going to yarn over, ready to do our second double crochet, and we're going to look between the next 2 stitches and find this big space, pop your hook in there, and then complete your double crochet. Okay, just going into that big space, and then in our corner we're going to do 2 double crochet. So in this corner acts a bit like working into the ring, really, so just work in that space as you would work into a ring, doing 2 double crochets, just like so. Okay, and then chain 2 for your corner, for your space, and then, so this is this way, and then kind of turn your work 90 degrees, and then we're going to do another 2 stitches here for this side. So 2 stitches again into this corner space, 1 and 2. Okay, so you can see we did our slip stitch into here for our first chain 3 stitch. Now that first one will be slightly slanted, but when you've got the whole thing made, it won't show as much. Okay, and then we've got 1 between the next 2, and then we've got 2 in our corner, and then we did this chain 2 to bring us around the corner, and then turn, and we've got the first 2 ready for this side. Okay, So then we're going to do a double crochet in between the next 2 stitches. So until you're familiar with working between the stitches, you might want to just take them and pull them apart like so, and then do your double crochet in this big space. So we're ignoring where the normal top of the stitches are and just working into that space. So do that between the next 2, find the big space and go into there, double crochet. Excuse me, and then we're going to go into the next corner just as we did over here. So 2 double crochet in this space. Okay, remember we use this as if it's working into the ring. So just go into there and do your 2 double crochet. Okay, don't forget to pause the video if you need to. Pause, rewind, do whatever you need to do. Okay, so then we need to do a chain 2 to take us around the corner. So that is that side completed now. So we've got 2 in the corner, and then we've got 2 along the middle, and then 2 in this corner. Okay, and then we're going to turn our work and do 2 in this corner for this side here. So 2 double crochet there. Okay, and then we're going to do a double crochet between these next 2 stitches. So go in between those 2 stitches, double crochet, and then a double crochet between the next 2. And then back to your corner with 2 double crochets in there. I am going to do the whole round with you on camera. I won't do the whole of every round with you on camera, but I will for a start until you're more familiar with it. Okay? I know some of you will be very familiar with it and you'll be sailing away now. I probably won't need any more of the video, but there's always some people that do. So chain 2 and then turn your square. We're going to do 2 for this side now. So 2 double crochet in that corner space. And then a double crochet between the next 2. So in that space there. And then a double crochet between the next 2. So hold that open, yarn over, go straight into there and do your double crochet. More yarn. Okay, and then we're back to our corner space. So 2 double crochet in this corner space like so, chain 2, and that's that side completed. So we've got 3 sides completed now. Let me take my hook out and show you. So we started here and we've just got part of that side done, okay, but then we've got this side done, and you should have 2, 4, 6 stitches on each side. 2, 4, 6 stitches, okay, and then turn for this side and we've got that side completed with 6 stitches. Turn and we've got the third side completed with 6 stitches. And now we just need, we've got the chain 2, we now need to just finish off this first side that we started on. Okay, so we're going to put the 2 stitches in the corner, 2 double crochet in the corner. Now if these stitches get in the way, if you find that you're catching them like this, then just fold that down so it's out of the way. It's easy to catch and pull the yarn, so just fold those down if they get in the way. Okay, so do your 2 double crochet in the corner, and then this one doesn't look so much like it's coming from that space, but it is. Okay, so then we're going to do a slip stitch into the top chain just as we did on the previous round. So you're going to look for the top chain and go into there and do your slip stitch just like so, and then that is your second round finished. So you've got a slightly bigger square now. Oops, there we go. Okay, so you can see you have got a very tiny gap here from where you started, but if I show you this one here, this is where this would be my second round here. There's a slightly bigger gap there, but in the grand scheme of things, you do get this seam going up here, but it's not as noticeable as you think when you've got the whole square done. It's really not as noticeable as you think. Okay, so let's move on to the next round. Okay, so let's move on to round 3. So at the moment our hook and yarn is coming out of this first stitch here, this chain 3. So we're going to go between that chain and the next stitch and do a slip stitch. So put your hook in this space, yarn over, pull through, and then pull through that loop on your hook. Oh, excuse me, I thought I was going to have the hiccups then. Hiccups not good on camera. Okay, so then for our first stitch we chain 3, and then we're going to go in between the next 2 stitches. Now the stitches are slightly further apart, so you probably won't have to pull them apart now. So go into there and do your double crochet. And then your corner stitches will always be close together, but these ones, because we've already separated them, are a bit further apart. So go in between your next 2 stitches and do a double crochet. And now there's no more stitches to go between. That's our last stitch. So we're into our corner space. So 2 double crochets into the corner, 2 stitches into that corner. Okay, and then we're going to chain 2, turn around and do 2 more in this corner. Okay, so every corner will be 2 stitches, 2 chains and 2 stitches. Okay, 2, 2, 2, and then we're back to our side. So we're going to go between the first 2 stitches with a double crochet, or a treble if you're using UK terms, and then between the next 2, and between the next 2, between the next 2, and then we've got 2 more stitches here, so between those make a space and go in there, and that's our last stitch. We're at our corner space. So our corner, 2 stitches, 2 chains, and turn and do 2 more stitches. Okay, back to our stitches along here. So double crochet in between your first 2 stitches, and then in between the next 2, and between the next, and between the next, and between the next 2. And that's our last stitch there. Okay, hopefully I'm still in the right place on screen. I've had to move the camera to be able to, well, the phone, to put it on charge. So I do hope it's still in the right place. Had to move it a bit closer to the charger lead. Okay, so let's continue. We've done this side, we were at our corner now, so we're going to do 2 double crochets in our corner, chain 2, and that's that side complete. So we're going to do the this last side, 2 double crochet in your corner, then a double crochet between the next 2 stitches, and then between the next 2, and between the next 2, and between the next 2. Now, just to give you a little hint, if you don't want to have to keep separating, is yarn over on your hook ready for your stitch, and then just take your hook next to this stitch and just sort of slide it down, just let it sort of slide into that space, okay, and then complete your stitch. So I'll show you that again. Yarn over, and then just kind of, you're at this stitch, and then just kind of let your hook go down, okay, like so, like that. And it saves you having to separate. You might want to start separating for the first little while, but once you're more familiar with it, then you can just kind of let your hook work for you. Sorry, so now we're doing 2 in the corner, getting carried away there. 2 stitches in the corner space, and then chain 2, turn around, 2 more stitches in your corner space. Okay, and now we're going to finish this side that we started. So we've got a space or stitches here that don't have any stitches coming from them, so in between this next 2 stitches, you see my hook nearly catching there, so fold those down if you need to, okay, and then go between these next 2 stitches, and then you've got the next stitch already coming there from here, okay, this slanted stitch. Okay, we're going to make that less slanted by doing our slip stitch in the top chain. So look at the very top, find that chain, pop your hook in there, and do your slip stitch. There we go. So yes, these 2 stitches here are very slightly sort of slanted, but as I told you, it does all kind of blend in as you go further along. It's making it very obvious at the moment on camera because I've got the camera light on, so it's showing it much more obviously than if you didn't have the light focused in on all these tiny gaps everywhere. Okay, to the naked eye, like so, it's not as noticeable. Okay, so you've just done round 3. Give yourself a pat on the back if you've never done this before, never made a granny square, the basic granny or the solid granny. Give yourself a pat on the back for getting to round 3. Okay, so that was the end of round 3. Now if you've never made any type of granny square before, give yourself a pat on the back for getting to round 3 already. Well done. Okay, so if you also have never counted rounds before and you're not quite sure how to work out how many you've done, if you can't quite tell, then you just want to count from the corners. We don't count this middle gap, that's just from our centre ring. But if you count the corners, you've got 1, 2, 3, and then that's the centre. So 1, 2, 3, 3 rounds. Okay. Excuse me, very croaky today. Okay, so let's move on to round 4. Now I'm not going to do the whole round with you because I think you're kind of getting the hang of it now. So we are here at the top of our chain 3 where we did a slip stitch, so we need to go between our chain 3 and the next stitch and make a slip stitch. So go into there, yarn over, pull through, and complete that slip stitch. Okay, and then chain 3 for your first stitch, and then you're going to continue just as before, go between the next 2 and do your stitch, and between the next 2 and make a stitch, and between the last 2. And then we've now at our last stitch, so we're going to do the corner which was 2 stitches, chain 2, and then 2 more stitches. Oops. Try that one again. Just lost my hook there. Okay, and then back onto the next side. So again, you're going to do 1 stitch between every set of stitches. So 1 stitch between each. Just popping your hook into that big space, not the actual stitch at the top. So this little gap here at the top, which would count as the stitch, we're just ignoring that and going into this big space at the bottom. Oops, yarn over first. We're doing double crochets, and between the next 2 and the last 2, and then we're back at our corner for 2 double crochet, chain 2, and 2 more double crochet. Okay, so now this is where I'm going to leave you to continue on your own. So what you want to do is to continue doing 1 double crochet between every stitch, or between every 2 stitches. Okay, so 1 between each. Okay, and on this row you will have 12 stitches, I think. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 stitches on this round. We increase by 3 every round, so you'll have 12. If you want to make sure, you'll have 12 in total, including your 2 on each end. So continue along, 1 in between each of the stitches, and then do your corner, which is 2, chain 2, and 2 more stitches. If you get confused, just look back at what you've done previously. Okay, so if you're along here and you're at the corner and you forget what you've done, just look back at previous corners and see what you did there. Okay, trust your judgment and look back at your own work. So do this side, the corner, and then continue along this side, and then when you get to here, I will come back and I'll continue this last side with you. Okay, so pause the video now and do these 2 sides, and then I'll finish this side with you. Okie dokie, I have done these 3 sides. So I've done this last corner. I've just got this last few stitches here to do on the side where we started. Okay, so we're going to go between these first 2, and then the next 2, and then the next 2, and then we've got 1 last stitch to do between our stitch here and our chain 3. So 1 in there, and then it's time to slip stitch. So find your top chain, 1, 2, 3, and pop your hook in and do your slip stitch like so. There we go, round 4 is finished and it's looking great. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 rounds finished. Gorgeous. I'm just going to pop the light of the camera off for a moment just so you can see it without the light sort of glaring on all the holes. So there we go, you can see it a bit sort of more now. You can see that actually these stitches aren't as obvious for leaning when you've not got that light shining through. You can see it a bit more, just like so. But obviously not quite bright enough for actually demonstrating, so I need to pop the light back on now. Okay, so obviously the thing with granny squares, basic granny squares or solid granny squares, is that you can make them as big or as small as you like. Some people mix sizes in making cushions and blankets. Some people make lots of the same size squares and then join them together and make a cushion cover or a blanket or something, or lots of other projects using squares. Lots of things you can make with crocheted squares, and some people just keep going and going and going and making a ginormous square and have that just one whole square as a blanket. So whether it's a small baby blanket, whether it's a lap blanket, or a giant king size blanket, you could just keep going and going and going and going and making it as big as you like. All from just one square. You can just keep going round and round, that way, round and round and round, that way if you're left-handed. You can just keep going and going and going. So entirely up to you how big you want to make these. A common size to make squares, crocheted squares, granny squares, is 6 inches. Many patterns that you see will say that it's a 6-inch pattern. That's variable depending on your tension, the hook size you use, and the yarn that you use. Varies so much, but a lot of patterns will be for 6-inch squares, or 12-inch. 6 and 12 tend to be the kind of sizes that you'll see a lot. So you could go for a regular 6-inch. Now this grey one is 6 inches. This red one will be about 5.5. It needs an extra round on it. So, and that one was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rounds. This one was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Gosh, yarn also varies. Now this was DK yarn and this was DK yarn, but you can see the difference is huge. So it all is a variable with crochet and yarn and hooks and tension and everything else. So just have a go and see how big you want it, whether you want to join them together, whether you want to make one big piece. Entirely up to you. Or whether you want to make 2 large pieces and make a thicker blanket and sew them back to back. You could sew them back to back and have a thicker blanket that's reversible. That would be pretty cool too. So entirely up to you, and you can change colour with this. Now I'm not going to show you about changing colour on this video, but you can change colour. Actually, I will show you how to change colour. Now that I've told you you can change colour, I will show you. So if you want to continue more rounds of this, just rewind the video if you need to and follow the instructions for starting again. But I'll just tell you right now that your first step is always, to start the next round, is always to go between your chain and your stitch and do your slip stitch. Okay, always slip stitch across for the first one and do your chain 3. Always slip stitch, chain 3, and then continue on doing your double crochets between the stitches. Okay, I'm going to grab some different colour yarn and show you how to change colour. Okay, I've just grabbed some yellow just so it's totally contrasting so you can see what I'm doing. Now there are probably 101 ways of changing colour of yarn, and it varies depending on what you're making as well. I will change colours in different ways depending on what I'm making and the stitches I'm using. Now because of this pattern that we slip stitch at the end of every round and then we slip stitch across to start the next, then I would change colour on this in a particular way. And the way I would do it, I've just backtracked, so I'm going to show you here. So let me just get that. Okay, so I've taken it back to my last stitch and then do my slip stitch. Okay, do my slip stitch, and then what I'm going to do is fasten off this colour. So yarn over and pull through, and then cut the yarn, leaving at least 6 inches to sew it in, and then pull that through and pull that tight, and you've got a tiny little knot down at the bottom there by that chain. Okay, so pull that nice and tight and then sew this in at the end. Okay, leave at least 6 inches or so to sew in. And then what I do, now this is how I change colour on this particular pattern. Not every pattern it's not how I would change for every pattern. Now, one of the easiest ways to change colour is to just tie your new colour on. So what I would do, remember we want to go between the spaces, okay? So we would go from this chain where we slip stitched into this space here. Okay, so that is where I'm going to join my yarn. So I'm just going to pop the tail through like so in that space, and then I'm going to tie. I'm literally just going to tie it once like so. No big knot, just tie it once, but nice and tightly, really tight. And then that yarn is joined in that space, which is where we would have slip stitched. Just ignore the blue tail, pop your hook through, and then this is where I would then yarn over and pull up a loop. Okay, so an empty hook, the yarn is tied over that space where we would have slip stitched, pop your hook into there, and then catch the yarn and pull through, and that will be your first chain. So then yarn over and pull through. So now you can see you've got 1 chain, 2 and 3 chains. Perfect. Okay, and then you just continue between the next 2 stitches, and between the next 2, and the next, and the next, and then the corner. Oops, just like so. Okay, and that is how I would change colour on this particular pattern. And on other patterns I change colour differently, but it's all up to you. If you've never changed colour before, this is a very simple way to change colour. And then you just sew in this tail at the end as well as your blue tail. So that is how you make the variation of this solid granny. If you've never made the solid granny, then there are lots of videos out there, and I will pop a link in the description to one for you from the 2018 Granny Square Crochet Along that I was involved with. I didn't do the video, but there is a video there for that particular square. Okay, so that is where I'm going to leave it today. I've shown you how to start, how to make it, and I've shown you how to fasten off, because I showed you on this blue how you fasten off. So when you've done it as big as you want it, just fasten off how I showed you here. I'll show you on this yellow. Obviously you would not fasten off there, but I'll show you how, again, how I fasten off. So I work as if I'm going to chain. Okay, so as if it's a chain, pull through, and then cut the yarn, leaving a tail. Now that's not a 6-inch tail, but this is just for demo purposes. Pull that through, and then pull that nice and tight, and you just have a tiny little knot at the end, and then you have your ends to sew in. There you go. So I'm going to pop the pictures up on screen, and leave you to continue on your squares, and I will pop a video up of how I made these bobbins as well. Really handy for small pieces of yarn. I will show you how to do that as well very soon. Okay, so here's the regular solid granny square, and here's the variation, the slightly more messy look, and here's the one that we did today, showing you how to change colour. There we go. So I hope you've found this useful and helpful, and that if you have been crocheting for a while and you know the solid granny square really well, but never made it in this way, I hope you've really enjoyed making a different version of it. And it really does look like a different square because of the mesh and open look. So if you have found this useful and helpful, you've enjoyed crocheting along, then please click that like button, give me a thumbs up, it's much appreciated. It's good to know if you've stopped by. So do leave a comment at the bottom of the page. Comments, questions, anything you like. Let me know you've stopped by. It's always good to know who's been watching and crocheting along. And if you've got any photos of what you've made, I'd love to see them. I am on Instagram. If you tag me as Teacup Jojo on Instagram, then that would be cool too. I'd love to see what you've made. So until next time, just keep hooking and don't let your cup of tea get cold.